And I'm going to start discussing here. So my name is Peter Larson. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. I'm here with Philip Sherwood, and Philip and I are going to talk a little bit about our recent trip to Israel, Palestine. And I'm going to try to share. Now, where's the share? There's the share button. And here. Now, and anybody, okay, Philip, can you see the picture? Does it look right? Am I sharing?
You've got all the sidebar stuff on.
Okay,
So,
thank you. I'll get rid of that from the beginning. How's that?
that's good.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much and welcome everyone for this debrief that I'm doing with Philip Sherwood. Philip and I traveled around together for a little while. We have done that before, and Philip is a member of the National Coordinating Team of the United Network for Justice and Peace in Palestine, Israel. He tells me he first went to Israel, Palestine in 2012. That's 13 years ago. I looked at my records. I first went in 2009, so I have a slight edge on him. We traveled around and talked quite a bit to quite a few people. The outline of our presentation is that I'm going to do this little introduction for 5 minutes. Part one will be done by Philip, a presentation on what he saw or we saw in the West Bank, and part two was what he saw in Israel, and I'll talk about that and a question and answer. But Philip, why don't you just say a word about yourself, just so that you're introduced.
So I'm BC based. I'm a semi-retired freelance writer and editor. I've had a lifetime interest in Palestine. I knew Palestinians when I was young. I lived in Europe for a while. And however, then I got busy with life and sort of followed things from very far off. But in 2012, when I went, I traveled independently for 2.5 weeks in the West Bank. And that really changed me, seeing the reality of the occupation and what's going on there. I went back in 2014 for a month with partly with Christian Peacemaker team. And then I got involved locally doing advocacy work, human rights. And then I went back again with Peter in late 2022, and we traveled together for about 2 weeks. I've gotten a lot busier since October 7th, helping organize community solidarity groups. I also do a lot of talking. I've spoken for the last 10 years. I've done in-depth presentations at universities on Palestine in political science classes. So I sort of have a background. And I recently completed delivering a 9-part course on Zoom entitled It Didn't Start on October 7th, Zionism and Its Victims.
Thanks, Phil.
Sorry, I keep going.
No, it's okay. There's lots to say. First of all, I want to make a very brief land acknowledgement. I'm broadcasting here from Ottawa. Phil's in BC. We have asked for and got the permission from Anishinaabe Regional Council here in Ottawa to continue our work, and we're happy to acknowledge that. The way we're going to proceed is I'm going to invite people to raise their hand. Use the buttons at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand if you want to talk, but want to raise questions. But please let us do our presentations first, and then we'll get into question and answers afterward. I'll say to those people who follow this issue carefully, you probably won't find very much surprising in what Phil and I have to say today. You might find it reaffirms stuff you already know. But if you're not deeply into it, and if your knowledge is limited to what you picked up on CBC or the National Post or CNN or the Globe and Mail, then you may find some things that are surprising based on our reporting. As you can see here, we traveled around between the two of us quite extensively in both Israel and in the occupied territories. And we set up meetings and had meetings with a number of people. Some are businessmen, some are actually involved in tourism, some are activists, some people from refugee camps and so on. You don't need to have copy of this down. I will be making this available in a follow-up YouTube, so you will get the information if you want to know more precisely who we talked to. Now I'm going to stop this sharing, and I'm going to turn over, if I can do it properly, I'm going to turn to Philip's slides, share, and slideshow from the beginning. Philip, we're going to talk about what's happening in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Can anybody not see that? And if you can't see that, let me know. I still look on the chat. Okay, Susan's got a question for afterwards. Okay, Philip, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a writer, and so I tend to write down my comments, so I'm going to read them. It helps me stay focused. So during my recent trip, my fourth, I spent 11 days as part of a political study tour based in the West Bank that was organized by the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, or ICAD. After that, I based myself in Bethlehem and Ramallah for 2 weeks before meeting Peter and traveling with him. In contrast to previous visits, I spent less time, quote, doing and more time meeting people and listening to their stories. So what's changed in the occupied territory since my last visit in late 2022? The biggest changes have occurred because of the events of October 7th. October 7th has changed everything. Almost every conversation about the situation and daily life began with, since October 7th. Next. And that's Peter and me taking a few moments off. And next. So a few examples of how things have changed. Israeli forces, both the army and the settlers, have been conducting a brutal pacification campaign designed to erase all resistance and convince the Palestinians that their best hope for survival is to unconditionally submit or to leave. I was told that Israelis want to expel Palestinians from Area C, 60% of the West Bank, and then annex it. Settler groups have especially encouraged Palestinians to leave. They've mounted huge billboards declaring, quote, "There is no future in Palestine," accompanied by an image of Gazan refugees. Next. I was told that Israeli forces are specifically targeting the refugee camps, the historic centers of resistance. The goal is to eradicate the refugee problem and the accompanying claim of their right of return. To accomplish this, Israel is destroying portions of the camps and attacking UNRWA, which operates the camps. The refugees will be forcibly integrated into the surrounding communities, and then they will no longer be refugees. Next. The pacification of the northern cities of Tulkarm and Jenin is largely completed. While I was in Bethlehem, soldiers entered the neighboring Deshe camp and distributed leaflets with the following text. Next. Residents of Deshe camp, be alert. As you have already seen, the camps in the northern West Bank have paid a heavy price due to terrorist and militant activities. Wherever there is terrorism, life is damaged. Security forces will use all available means against any attempt or activity of this kind. The one who is being warned is now without excuse. Next. All Palestinian dissent is ruthlessly suppressed. Many people have a healthy fear of Israeli surveillance and were afraid to talk openly or have their photo taken. Israeli forces monitor social media, and even a like on an offending post can result in arrest, interrogation, and imprisonment. Thousands of Palestinians have been arrested, tortured, and imprisoned for months without charges. A director of a refugee camp cultural program explained to us that after October 7th, he was kidnapped by soldiers at a checkpoint. He disappeared for 9 months, during which he was beaten and tortured, but never charged. Currently, there are 9,900 Palestinian political prisoners, twice as many as in April 2022. These include 400 children. 3,500 are held in administrative detention without being charged. Next. Since October 7th, Israeli forces have drastically restricted freedom of movement with hundreds of military checkpoints and arbitrary road closures. It is impossible for Palestinians to travel between cities, towns, and villages without encountering checkpoints and enduring possible lengthy delays. Many people spoke of spending hours in a lineup at a checkpoint without moving. Some watched 2 Netflix movies in one spot. Then they had their car searched and were manhandled, searched, interrogated, and verbally and physically abused. Next. Soldiers also arbitrarily and without warning closed roads and highways. During my stay, soldiers closed the main road between Ramallah and Bethlehem that connects the southern and central West Bank. I was told that strategically placed gates ensure that any community can be turned into a prison in 2 hours. I saw dozens of these gates during my trip. Next. So that's one of the gates. Checkpoints and road closures cause enormous hardship to Palestinians. Workers cannot reach their place of employment. Students cannot go to class. Patients cannot attend medical appointments, and businesses cannot transport their goods. The unpredictability means that no one can plan their day. Next. The restrictions of movement has also further fragmented an already fragmented society as people tend to stay at home. What used to be a 2-hour, 100-kilometer drive between Ramallah and Jenin could now take 4, 6, or 8 hours or more and be fraught with uncertainty and danger. Why risk it? Next. Soldiers and settler violence has dramatically increased in recent months, up 30% over 2024 and the highest level in 20 years. Soldiers used to spit upon or beat anyone who upset them, but now they are just as likely to shoot them. The right-wing government has released them from constraints and encouraged the dehumanization of Palestinians. The Hamara checkpoint is known as, quote, the killing checkpoint because of how many Palestinians have been killed there. Next. Armed settlers act with impunity and the approval of the Israeli military, attacking Palestinian villages and hurting communities. While their activities in Massacre Yatta have gained widespread attention due to the film No Other Land, a similar campaign of terror is taking place throughout the West Bank, including the Jordan Valley. Next. Members of the Jordan Valley Solidarity Campaign in the village of Bardala told us of armed settlers attacking farms at night, committing acts of vandalism, and stealing livestock. 2 weeks after our visit, settlers shot 7 villagers and burned down 2 homes in a nighttime raid. Israeli soldiers and police stood by and did nothing. Next. Settlers also attack cars. My host in Ramallah visits his family in Nablus regularly, and settlers have smashed his windshield twice. Locals advised me to schedule my trip between Ramallah and Bethlehem on a Saturday, as this is the Jewish Sabbath, and the settlers are in their homes. This worked. The main checkpoint was open, and the 90-minute trip in a service, a shared Palestinian taxi minivan, was uneventful. Next. The West Bank economy is in near ruins. Israel has canceled most work permits for Palestinians who work in Israel and withheld over $1 billion in tax revenue that belongs to the Palestinian Authority. Because of this, the PA has not paid its employees for 8 months and cut funding in every sector of society. In Ida refugee camp, 70% of the population lost their jobs overnight after October 7th. Hebron and Bethlehem have seen a huge drop in tourism. The old city of Hebron is a ghost town, with 80% of the shops closed. Bethlehem has been devastated. Major Square is deserted, except for a few people selling trinkets. A visit to the grotto where Jesus was born in the Church of the Nativity normally means a lineup of an hour. Now there's no one. A guide we hired said we were his first customers in 18 months. Next. Fear of the future is widespread. Fear, despair, and devastation are words I heard often. Every Palestinian I spoke to, young or old, is afraid. They see that what is happening in Gaza will happen in some form in the West Bank. It already is happening. Conditions have never been so bad, and many feel that their collective existence is threatened. Day-to-day life is full of danger. Passing through a checkpoint is an inconvenience for me, a Westerner, but for Palestinians, it can be a life-threatening experience. As one student at Bethlehem University told us, quote, "No one knows what is going to happen, and we don't know when we will die." Compounding this fear is despair, as Palestinians clearly see, they've seen it for a long time, that the United States and other Western governments like Canada have betrayed and abandoned them. Human rights and the protection of international and humanitarian law are for others, but not for them. Next. Many Palestinians feel their only hope is the support of civic society and solidarity groups in the West. To that end, I was continuously welcomed with traditional, authentic Palestinian hospitality. People thanked us for caring enough to come and see. They said it gave them hope and a sense that they're not forgotten. They particularly appreciated that we planned to speak of our experiences at home. One activist told us to, quote, "annoy our MPs." And another said, quote, "share the bad news, not the beauty." That's not difficult because overall the situation is truly dire. Much, much worse than my last visit in 2022. Next. 2 closing thoughts. During my trip, I met a left-wing rabbi, Arik Asherman. He helps protect vulnerable Palestinian herding communities in Area C near Jerusalem that are constantly attacked by Israeli settlers. At great risk, he regularly stands between the herders and the settlers. He confirmed that the situation is bleak. However, his faith and understanding of Jewish history and tradition has motivated him to promise the herders that whatever happens, quote, "you will not be alone." This resonated with me. In 2022, I spoke with Badi Dwight, a Palestinian human rights defender in Hebron. At one point, he said, quote, "our job is to resist the occupation here. Your job is to go home and raise awareness among Canadians and pressure your government to change its policies." I returned from this trip to Palestine more determined than ever to keep trying to fulfill this mandate. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Thank you for that. We will, rather than doing the question and answer, with your permission, I'll do my segment on the West Bank. Sorry, on Israel, and then afterwards we'll open to question and answer, if that's okay. Before that, I'm going to talk about something, just a second here, show you a little video about the transition going from West Bank into Israel. And this is about 30 seconds. It's my, hold on a second. Well, have I got the sound on? Let's see. The Calandia crossing. Can you hear the sound, Philip? That's Jerusalem. Philip, can you hear the sound? Can anybody hear the sound?
Yes, I can hear it.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
that's fine.
yes.
Okay, so this is I took this kind of furtively as I was coming across the border from Ramallah into Jerusalem. It's about 40 seconds long, just to get a sense of what it's like to go from the West Bank into Jerusalem. So here I am at the Calandia crossing. That's Jerusalem over there. I'm on this big walkway. Over here is where I come from. The background is Ramallah. Down there, the cars are coming through. I had to go through this internal facility over here where there were lots of gates and red lights and armed guards and stuff like that. Now I'm going to go catch a bus to get to Jerusalem. Well, there is this huge infrastructure that is like looks like an airport terminal from one side. Then you go into the maw of it. You can't take pictures inside it, so you have to rely on my description. There's gates and red lights and green lights and soldiers with guns and so on, and you work your way through it till finally you get onto the Jerusalem side. Now I'm going to go back to here, and I'm here. Okay, so that was crossing over from Ramallah. Oh, I'm going to expand this from the beginning. There we go. There we go. So that was crossing over from Ramallah in the West Bank at the Calandia checkpoint. Now I'm going to talk about what I saw and heard in Israel, we saw and heard in Israel, which is what the Palestinians call 48 Palestine. They make a distinction between the part of Palestine that was occupied in 1948 with the creation of the state of Israel and the part of Palestine that was extended and occupied in 1967. We visited three main cities, Haifa, which is up here at the top, Tel Aviv, Jaffa, which is right down here. They were two different towns. Now basically they're treated as one, and Jerusalem, which is here. We also, and in each place, we met with Israeli Jews and with Palestinian citizens of Israel, Palestinian Israelis. I'm not talking about Palestinians living in the West Bank now. I'm talking about Palestinian citizens of Israel. About 20% of Israel's population are not Jews, they're Palestinians. And we visited two Palestinian towns, including Kufr Qasim, which is about here, and Fahim, which is just up here, right at the edge here, just north of your sign, you say, till Karam. So for me, arriving in Jerusalem was kind of a breeze, apart from going through security at the Paris airport. Once I arrived in Ben Gurion, there is a new train that goes directly from Ben Gurion Airport right to Jerusalem. It takes about 25 minutes. I think it cost about $10. It was maybe less. It may have been 19 shekels, I think it was, which is more like $6 or $8. And so I arrived in Jerusalem. And the first thing that really surprised me when I got there is that I had expected to find a country at war. And what do I mean by that? Well, I had sort of expected to see Ben Gurion Airport with sandbags, with glass windows covered with plywood, with street lights diminished, and so on and so forth. And I was astounded that life seemed to be completely normal, and at least in the part of Israel that I traveled around in. There were no signs of any defensive preparations at all. There was no visible war damage. And as I said, I traveled around quite extensively. I traveled up here as far as Haifa, down here. I drove several hundred kilometers altogether. I didn't see any signs of any physical damage. And I asked people about it. For example, in Haifa, I was told that there had been an apartment building that was destroyed. I'm also told that in the north, near Lebanon, there had been some destruction. But in the center of Israel, going from basically this area here, from Haifa that far, I didn't see any damage whatsoever. And that surprised me because I had been reading stories about how the Houthis are doing damage and how the Hezbollah is doing damage and how the Hamas rockets are doing damage. That was not what I saw anywhere, even though I asked people. You can see on the right here are some pictures. This is arriving in the airport. Lots of signs for bring them back alive, bring them back the hostages. That certainly was a very common thing. I saw that everywhere. But apart from that, the cafes and restaurants were full. Philip and I went to a very popular cafe in Haifa that was for a brunch on a Saturday. It was full, but we were told that normally there would be a lineup around the block to get in. So I guess in that sense, there had been some economic damage, but frankly, the economic damage was not very visible. Now, I'm going to do another little street share here. Maybe I'm not going to do it this minute. Let's see what I got here. Try one more time. Can't do it. I did it. One more time. If I can't do it the third time, I will drop it. And keep on screen sharing. Okay, stop sharing. I'm sorry. This one. Video. Okay, I'm going to stop it. Sorry, folks. Go back to here. I'm going to the little clip I wanted to show you, and I thought I had it organized, was a street scene in Jerusalem where people were outdoors playing music, eating at restaurants, being very comfortable. I took a walk through the markets until the food markets. We're only 50 kilometers away from where 500,000 people are starving in Gaza. Here's the picture. So this guy was playing the piano. You can see these signs up here, and I'm going to, in my next picture here, I'll show you that this says the peace process with the terrorists should be canceled and the IDF should be allowed to win. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. So Israel is at war in a funny sense. I certainly saw lots of people in uniform. A furtive shot here in the not really the subway, it's a light rail. The young Israeli women have big weapons. I didn't know how they would react if I took pictures to their face, so I just took a picture of their guns. But we, for example, found the same thing when we went to Tel Aviv. We met up with Haggai Ad, who was the former executive director of B'Tselem. We ate outside in a very peaceful restaurant. And the thing that was strange to me is that it felt like Gaza and the West Bank was just as far from Tel Aviv, or just as far from Gaza was just as far from Tel Aviv as Ottawa was. There was I can't tell what people are thinking. I don't know what's going on in their minds. But during the 10 days that I was there, Israel killed over 400 Palestinians and injured another 1,000 in Gaza. There was that famine in Gaza, imposed famine, and IDF settlers had killed Palestinians in the West Bank and so on. But there was I didn't see any reflection of it. Now, I don't watch Israeli television, so I couldn't see what they're saying on television. And the only Israelis I talked to were people like Haggai and others who were basically non-Zionist or not supportive of the Israeli government. So I don't know what these other people in the cafeteria, in the outdoor coffee shop were thinking. But while Israel didn't seem to be at war for its Israeli citizens, it certainly felt that way for its Palestinian citizens, where there is quite intense repression of free speech, like you would expect in a war zone. For example, you probably know that Al Jazeera is no longer able to report from Israel or from the West Bank. Their offices were raided and they were taken out. And here's a little clip here. This picture on the right is from my hotel in Jerusalem. And you can't see it very well. This is the coffee shop of the hotel. And it had a great big television screen here. Now, in a Canadian hotel, in a coffee shop, you would expect the news to be on it. But this one, for a half an hour, showed pictures of Japanese people wandering through beautiful Japanese cherry trees, and they played it over and over again. And I found that a bit strange, so I asked the young woman who was the attendant there why they don't show the news. And she said, well, we don't want to show the Israeli news. This is in East Jerusalem, so technically it's part of the West Bank, but because it's on the Israeli side of the wall, it's treated as if it were Israel. She said, we don't want to show the Israeli news because our customers wouldn't like that and we don't believe them anyway. And we're afraid to show the Al Jazeera news because the Israeli police would come in and cause trouble for the management. So we just show cherry trees in Japan. We heard many stories about how a reflection of what we'd heard from what Philip had said, had mentioned in the West Bank, that Israeli Arabs were arrested over Gaza social media posts. We had one story of a young woman whose girlfriend was arrested and held for a month in jail. She had done a like on something that spoke critically, either spoke critically of Israel or a like of something that the Palestinian resistance had done. I'm not exactly sure, but people are scared and don't really use Facebook at all, and are actually quite nervous to have their pictures taken, as Philip mentioned. There's also intensified repression in another sense. Many people who have been to Israel-Palestine will have been to the educational bookshop, which is in East Jerusalem. And it is kind of a hub for progressive Westerners who come. There's literally thousands of books, right from Noam Chomsky to very well-known Israeli writers as well. But that bookshop has been raided twice. This man here, the owner and manager, was arrested. He was held in jail for some time, treated badly. And there was none of the books ended up being confiscated, but it clearly was an attempt to repress and intimidate. Now, this picture is not one that I took, but it's something out of Haaretz. This is a coffee shop in Tel Aviv, in which they're selling these chocolate eclairs that have written on them, "Let the IDF mow them down." So this was an article in Haaretz, which is complaining about the extent of the anti-Arab racism, how popular it is in Israel, reflected also in this clip from Middle East News, the far-right Israeli MK calling for the killing of Palestinian children on the grounds that they will grow up to be terrorists. But also we're told about rising anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian sentiment in the workplace. Hospitals and schools are one place that Palestinian citizens of Israel work alongside Jewish citizens of Israel. And on a professional basis, I take it that that goes along well. But the workplace has been extremely uncomfortable. When they take their break, for example, the Israeli Arabs sit in their own corner. There are lots of comments, people supporting this line that Hamas should be wiped out and so on, which makes the workplace very, very uncomfortable. A doctor told us that, and we also heard a similar story from a teacher of English who has some Israeli soldiers in her class, and she's Palestinian, but they are constantly making very negative, critical, racist remarks about Palestinians, and she keep her mouth shut all the time. Palestinians living in Palestinian villages also talked about a record wave of crime. Something that a lot of people might not understand is that in Israel, there are Palestinian towns and there are Jewish towns. And doesn't just mean towns where a lot of Palestinians live or towns where a lot of Jews live. There actually are laws that permit discrimination. So a Jewish town is able to say, we don't want you here on the ground of social discrimination. And so the Jewish towns get many more subsidies than the Arab towns. And there is a level of crime sweeping across the Arab towns, and many people think that is being actually encouraged by the Israeli police. When the Palestinian citizens of Israel resist, they are met by violent police repression. We did go to Al-Fahim, which is one of the larger Palestinian towns in Israel. You'll see here the Palestinian flag, but to raise the Palestinian flag inside Israel is not illegal. But if you raise it, you can expect to be attacked, or if you raise it in front of your house, you're going to expect your house to be trashed by the police on the pretext that they're looking for terrorists. So my conclusion is kind of a question: is Israel really at war? If you listen to CBC, read the Globe and Mail, you would think that there's an actual Israel-Hamas war. But on the Israeli side, we didn't see any signs of physical damage. There may be some, but not where we were. The economic impact, I'm not denying that it exists, but it didn't seem to be nearly as profound or difficult as I thought it might be. There is pressure on the government to get the hostages back, but I didn't see any evidence of any concern about the Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank. Now we see that kind of concern amongst some Canadian Jews. I circulated recently an article, an op-ed by a former Canadian ambassador to Israel, John Allen, who was urging the Canadian government to be much more aggressive in supporting international law. But inside Israel, I didn't see any reflection of that sentiment. And my conclusion is that Israel is going to be able to continue to expel and exterminate and kill Palestinians until there is some external pressure, because I don't see either economic or physical pressure that would induce Israel to change course. And that means to me that Western countries, including Canada, need to do something. This is a survey here. This is now a year old, asking people, Israeli Jews, what their responses were to what the damage that the IDF is doing in Gaza. 40% thought it was about right, and another 35% thought the IDF hadn't gone far enough. So there we go. That's our presentation. We went on a little bit over time, but not too much. And I would like you to encourage you to raise your hand or put your questions in the chat, in the Q&A, and Graft and Ross will be keeping an eye on the questions. If you do speak, you can have a question or you can make a comment. I don't mind if you say you disagree. That's perfectly fine. But keep it within a minute. If you raise your hand, keep it within a minute, comment or question, so we can try to deal with it. So who would like to go first?
Peter, Stephen Haddad here.
Sure, Stephen, go for it.
Just out of curiosity, are you planning on returning again?
Interesting question. You know, Stephen, one of the first things, Philip can answer separately, but for me, I don't know how many people said to me, "Oh, you're so brave." Someone says there doesn't seem to be a Q&A function. Okay, well, in that case, I have to raise your hand. I think there is a raise your hand function. So people said to me, "You're so brave," and I have to admit that I was a little bit nervous before going, but I don't know what I was apprehensive about. Once I got there, literally Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Haifa are just as safe as Ottawa. Now, of course, if Mr. Netanyahu started a war with Iran, then all bets would have been off. And in the West Bank, Philip and I were both in the hands of very competent Palestinian guides who made sure we didn't go where there was danger. They would know where there was going to be conflict. So we talked to people who'd suffered it. We saw the results of it, but we didn't actually, neither of us saw anything dangerous going on. So you asked me whether I would go back again. I now feel I thought this was going to be my last trip. And based on the reception I had and the safety I felt, I'm now more open to the idea. Philip, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I was mostly in the West Bank, and my only concerns were the Israeli soldiers and the settlers. I traveled more independently, and I never felt any concern of safety from the Palestinian side. I felt, on the contrary, I was welcomed and looked after. I never for 1 minute worried about personal safety. But for example, I was told by all the Palestinians I met not to go north of Ramallah. They said, once you go up there, the soldiers and settlers will just assume that you are pro-Palestinian if you're a foreigner there, and it might not end up well. So I didn't do that. So, but again, my concern, any threat for my safety would have come from the soldiers or the settlers.
Just on that, I mean, I did go north of Ramallah. I went to Nablus, and in fact, another friend of mine went to Jenin. But you have to go with a Palestinian who knows what's going on. They're paying attention and they know what to avoid.
And also, there's things like, the whole racist structure is that if you have a car with yellow license plates, which are Israeli, your experience is going to be very different than if you're traveling with, say, a Palestinian guide in a car with Palestinian plates, which are green. So you pull up at a checkpoint in a car with green license plates, you're going to be treated differently than if they have yellow license plates. So there's things like that they really make a huge difference when you're traveling around.
Please use the raise hand function. I see some questions in the chat, but I don't know how to prioritize them. So you click on the raise hand at the bottom. Do you not see that?
No.
I see it on mine, but you don't see it.
No.
Okay, well, in that case, I will.
It's under the react sign. You have to go to react first.
Okay.
Okay. React.
On my screen is react, and beside react is raise hand, like that. I just raised, raised
Okay.
the hand. Now I see lots of hands up. Okay. So,
Okay.
Okay, now people figured it out. All right, David Noppert. David, you have to unmute yourself, David. Can you do that?
Hi.
And
Hey,
after you
Peter.
finish talking, will you please mute yourself back, those who do talk? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Hi,
David.
Peter and Philip. I'm just interested when both you went to Ben Gurion and you had to go through immigration at Tel Aviv. Both of you are pretty active over here in Canada. And I just wonder how that was. And did either of you tell them that you're on a political study tour, or what question did they ask you?
Okay, my quick answer is I had no problems at all. I always tell the truth, but not necessarily all the truth. So I say I'm going to speak to see some friends. They say, where are you going? I say, well, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to Haifa, always true. They don't say, I don't tell them I'm going to the Balata refugee camp. They say, you don't need to tell everything, but you do tell the truth, and that works out just fine. Philip, did you have any trouble getting in?
I just prefer not to talk about the process.
Okay, Marvin.
Thank you.
Peter and Philip, did any of your Palestinian contacts, did you get into any kind of conversation with them about how they felt about Hamas and the leadership of the Palestinian movement? And was there any discussion of alternate strategies at all?
Yes. Do you want to start, Phil? I would like to say something on that, but Philip, maybe you want to say something.
I did. The thing about this trip was that what I learned was that because everything is so fearful that you can't just sort of start a casual conversation with someone and ask them what they think about Hamas.
Sure.
Now, if you have an appointment with someone to talk, as Peter and I did, and well, then that's fine. But you have to be careful because people are very scared. But in the West Bank, there's not a lot of grassroots support for Hamas. It's been more PLO, Fatah. In the South, in Hebron, there is more, but generally speaking, that's not where where their constituency is. There was a widespread contempt, which has been going on for a long time, of the PA. They're considered hopelessly corrupt and basically agents of the occupation, especially because of their security collaboration with Israel. And I mean, there's no real leadership because all the leaders are either in prison or dead or in exile. So, there wasn't much talk about national movements or anything like that. People are just trying to survive. They're hunkering down and just hoping they'll make it through another day or week. I'm talking again about the West Bank, which is where I spent most of my time.
My experience was a little bit different from Philip's, partly because I was mostly going to people that I've known for more than a decade.
Yeah, big difference.
And so they were, I think, perhaps more confident. And there I was surprised, notwithstanding what Philip just picked up, how there was people were much less critical of Hamas than I had expected. I do know some people who are very critical of Hamas, but mostly people thought, the ones that I talked to, that Hamas had made some important errors, but they thought that what they were trying to do was to capture Israeli military soldiers and bring them back and to trade them for prisoners, and that things went sideways and that they lost control of what was going on. So I would say that most of the people that I talked to, they weren't necessarily very religious, but they see Hamas now as the only force that's willing to stand up for Palestinians, and they admire their courage. On the larger question, I pressed several people, Marvin, on what's the Palestinian vision? Where do they see things going? I kind of framed it in terms of, is the Palestinian idea dead, like one extreme, or is the Israeli idea dead, or the Zionist idea dead? Because I've seen people argue, Ilan Pape, for example, argues that Zionism is on its death throes. Others say that the Palestinian national experiment is just about to be wiped out. Most people, first of all, said that they don't see either of those. They think that it's likely to continue on for a long time yet. And they're very much aware of the fact that it's Western pressure that will play. There's no way the Palestinians can mount enough military resistance to defeat Israel as long as Israel gets support from the West. So those are my reflections on it. And I think it depends a bit on who. I don't claim, but for an instant, that the people I talked to are representative of Palestinian society. They weren't the top leaders, and they weren't all the militants. They're kind of people like me who are politically active, but not leaders. So And they speak English. So I mean, there's a bias. It's a bias sample, but that does reflect what I said. John Coleman?
Hi, good to see you again, Peter. We were together nearly 10 years ago in November 2015, one of the tours that you led. And that was at the time that Justin Trudeau's government was being formed, or at least getting going. And now we have Mark Carney. When we came back, I wrote a letter to Trudeau and to the foreign minister, Dion, and I sent them a little essay in which I said that I thought that the two-state solution was a chimera, which was distracting people from the real truth of the situation. And the future had to be in one Palestine, Israel, with equal rights for all. It might take a long time, but that was what should be fought for. I thought there was a wee chance of success then. There was a joint list of Arab members of the Knesset who were working well and who looked as if they might gain a deep sense of gloom. And I have real doubts about whether the new Canadian government will wake up and smell the coffee.
Is that a question or just it's a very good comment?
Comment.
Well, John, I think you were prescient. We shared a room. We traveled around together. John is a former senior official in the Canadian government. I thought you asked good questions and made good contributions, and as you have again tonight. Thanks, John. Great to see you. Phil, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, sort of to preempt the inevitable questions about one state or two state. It came up with me in some of the events, the people I talked to when I wasn't with Peter. And one very informed Palestinian in East Jerusalem said that the trend now is the older people tend to keep clinging to this two-state solution, but anybody under 40 is basically, in whatever format you want to call it, is basically instinctively, intuitively going towards some sort of one-state solution. So I found that an interesting comment. I didn't meet anybody, waving the two-state flag. People often said it's the only people who support two-state are PA people who stand to lose the most if that option goes. So that's just an anecdotal comment.
Thanks, Phil. Dr. Doug McIntosh. Hi, Doug. Doug, you're muted. Gotta unmute yourself.
Did that do it?
That's done it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Peter and Philip. Thanks for the presentation. I was also on a come and see tour. I think it was more than 12 years ago. First one that Peter went on, or led actually. And I was interested in the comments tonight about the quiet state of society in Israel, and not in the Palestinian towns, but in the other Israeli towns. And how little it felt like war. My memory is that we, even when we were in those places back then, there was evidence of pairs of soldiers walking around with military assault rifles or weapons. And there was not a sense of a country at peace. There was a sense of a country kind of on the alert all the time. So it sounds like it's different in a way that you wouldn't expect. And I'm wondering, I'm sure that there must be a huge sense of denial, or at least trying to keep the population in a state of denial about being at war. I mean, that would be the sort of explanation I might just guess at to explain that situation. And I know you couldn't engage the average person on the street. You couldn't walk up and start talking about it. That didn't feel safe. But do you think that my feeling about that might be true?
I don't know that I have much. I don't have any evidence to comment one way or the other. It makes sense to me. I think the Israeli population is totally convinced that what Hamas did was Hamas is an ISIS-like anti-Semitic vengeful, vicious organization which exercises a dictatorship inside the West Bank and Gaza, and which wants to kill Jews. I think, and if you believe that, then you don't really care about the situation of Palestinians and so on and so forth. That's what I think. It's even people. I heard that people even you challenge that narrative, you can lose your position at the university, or you can get arrested if you do a Facebook post. So it's just not on. And I didn't try to do that. I didn't try to address anybody and say, you really believe that. Although I don't believe that story. But I think that there's widespread belief in that, which is what undergirds kill them all, don't negotiate with the terrorists, all that sort of stuff. That's my view.
Peter, can I jump in?
Sure, please.
On my ICAD tour, we visited with the editor of 972 magazine, and he was talking a lot, very interesting about the media. And he said, by and large, the Israeli media is feeding the public sort of a very pro-Zionist message. The media in Israel is not for all the citizens, but it's for the Jewish citizens. And people are lapping it up. You know, this is what they want to hear. They're receiving it. It's uncritical. So it's sort of a, you know, both sides are buying into this narrative of not even the Palestinians don't exist. And it's very much shaping the public opinion. So, and you certainly see it when you realize that, you know, for me, at one point we had a couple hours off. We were walking down the seafront in Tel Aviv, which is stunningly beautiful, beautiful day, everybody out swimming and doing that kind of stuff. And you realize it doesn't, like Peter has said, it's not a place at war. But secondly, that all these people, you know, maybe 80% of them are perfectly comfortable with what's going on in Gaza. And, you know, and many of them have probably served there. So that was a bit shocking to realize.
David Nubbert, I see your hand is up, but you already got to speak, so you don't mind, I'll skip over you or put down your hand if it's just up from left before. Tom Kerwin?
Yes, I'm interested from both you and Philip, what your opinions are from discussions with Israelis. I think that Philip's already started answering the question. What I've often heard here in Calgary and another place in Canada, that after October 7th, the Israeli peace movement basically collapsed. And you get the sense that the Zionist faction now feels as though they've won the day more or less, and that it's just a matter of time before they keep, you know, hammering down any sense of resistance otherwise. So it might become a uni-state. It might all become Israel with Palestinian second-class citizens. Is that your take?
Philip?
Well, again, the editor we talked with, oh, I've lost my track of thought now. Peter.
Go ahead. Whether religious right will end up taking over and making it a one religious state, basically, is I think. But
yeah, the left. Yeah, he said that the left after October 7th, the October 7th affected everybody, you know, in Israel, the Jewish people, more than we can imagine. But he said the left basically evaporated after October 7th, and a lot of them said, "Oh, we must have got it wrong," and so the left almost doesn't exist as a movement in Israel now. There are people who are, you know, left wing, like this editor was, but the movement generally has died down. And he said that now the anti-war movement is the bring the hostages home movement. So he said that's all that there is. So I would say that the left is essentially non-existent. There are people who are speaking out, you know, courageous journalists and people like that, Jeff Halpert, people like that. But by and large, the left, my take on it is they are virtually non-existent and certainly not high profile.
Because Hamas has basically played into the Zionist narrative very well.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, Hamas exercised their right to resist occupation but through armed resistance, and how that turned out is the subject of debate, whether what they did was intentional or maybe they were a victim of their own success. But most Israelis don't have any time for Palestinians at this point. No time at all.
You did mention something I think is important to keep in mind, and that is people like Jeff Halper or Gideon Levy or others, and Haggai Elaid, they don't feel like they are at imminent danger of arrest. It's not that.
No.
If you're an Israeli Jew, you can be hated, and Haggai said that he's hated 10 times more now than he was before October the 7th. But he's not. He actually told us he was afraid. Afraid to go to the U.S. So you don't know what's going to happen in the U.S. You might end up in a prison in Louisiana. He doesn't feel that way in Israel. So there is some space left for Israeli Jews to be critical of the government, even if they're very unpopular, kind of in a political sense. I see two other people have their hands, Francis Combs and Dorcas Gordon. Francis?
Yes, just from reading Haaretz newspaper daily, which I do get the impression that what you said, Peter, about the people not feeling at war in Israel, I certainly have the impression that that is true because of widespread denial. Mm-hmm. That's what the impression I got from Haaretz, that there's a widespread denial in Israel as to what's really happening there.
I have no evidence for that, Francis, but it's also what I believe to be true. The newspapers are not covering very much, and I don't think the audience is demanding that the newspaper cover it. There's just not very much interest in it. I think that's
right. That's right. Yeah.
Dorcas, unmute yourself, Dorcas. And David, no, if he wants to come back on, that's fine. Dorcas first.
But there does seem to be a fear within the Israeli government at the resistance, the peace groups that are still very active. There is a bill before the Knesset right now that is, if it's passed, will effectively shut down some of the peace groups because it is putting a tariff or whatever on monies that they receive from overseas groups.
Tariffs are popular these days.
Sorry, go ahead.
Tariffs are popular these days.
Yes, of course they are. But I mean, I think you don't do that unless you fear something.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is a fear that these groups are having some traction and they're working to wipe them out through this bill going through Knesset, which again is another step.
I'm glad you raised that, Dorcas, because I think a lot of the support for the more liberal groups, comes from liberal Jews in America, whether it's the New Israel Foundation or whether it's Peace Now, 972. A lot of these organizations are supported financially by progressive American Jews, and this bill they're going to tax them at like 75% or whatever of their contribution will go to it makes it very, very difficult for foreigners to support these progressive NGOs that do exist. Philip?
Yeah, just to add on that, my impression very much is that the whole anti-war movement is about the return of the hostages, and that the day that all the hostages are returned, 90% of Israelis will, disengage from any concern about what happens to the Palestinians. There's very little mention of people being concerned about the Palestinians in the West Bank or in Gaza and what they're suffering. It's very much centered on the hostages.
Right. David Knopper, please.
Thanks, Peter. So, question for you and Philip. There seems to be, I guess, more than, and you've sort of addressed this already, but there's a hatred. There's an evil that emanates from the government and from the army that we see every day. My question is, how widespread amongst the Israeli population, the average person, do you think that this hatred and this evil is?
Maybe Philip's in a better position. All my information on that is intermediate through reading Haaretz, reading 972, and so I have really no. Oh, and also the conversation with Haggai Elad. But really, I'm not in a good position. I'm sorry, even though I was there. In fact, I turned around to you. You were there in the West Bank. I doubt that you have a whole lot more insight, even though you're a lot smarter than I am. I'm not sure you have more insight than I would on that issue.
I would like to pass on a comment. I asked the ex-director of B'Tselem
Still in my webinar.
how the Israeli public reacted to their very critical reports and human rights reports. And he said, well, they've always hated us and they've hated what B'Tselem publishes. And he said, since October 7th, they hate us 10 times more. So that's sort of, I found informative as to the general public state of mind.
Now, I have some, looking at some questions here that may not have been, just looking in the course is recorded. That's a question. Again, Philip's course was recorded as well. Susan says that I'm hard to understand, so I wish I'd seen that earlier. I hope you can hear me. David asked some sort of technical questions for what we said on the way in. So question is, are Palestinians openly speaking about leaving? That's an interesting question because we heard both. We met, for example, Philip and I talked to our young guy. He said, he's in Bethlehem. I love it here. This is my country here. I'll die here. There's no way they're going to kick me out of that. We heard that, and he wasn't the only one, but he was the fiercest defender of that position. On the other hand, we talked to a wealthy Palestinian citizen of Israel. When I say wealthy, he has a $2 million apartment in Haifa, and he is worried about what the situation his kids are going to be in. So he is thinking about moving either to Canada or to moving to Cyprus because he has a business to run. So Palestinians with money, and particularly ones with children, are inclined to think about that. The Palestinians who don't have the money are probably more inclined to dig in and stay. I think certainly they all want to stay. The question is whether they're going to do. We talked to a Christian businessman in Bethlehem, and he was saying he expects that if the world were to say to people in Gaza, you can get out and we'll give you a good life somewhere else, a lot of them would think about their kids. If you look forward to what the situation in Gaza, how can you expect to have a life for your kids, even if the war stops? So the answer is divided, I think. Would you agree with that, Philip?
Yeah, and I'd like to add that we did talk to another, Peter and I talked to another very left-wing Israeli journalist, youngish, and he said that almost all his friends have left.
Israelis, yeah.
Yeah, Israelis. So Palestinians are thinking about it. Israelis are more likely to have the ability to leave. And he said almost all the friends, his peers have left, or certainly thinking about it.
Doug, I see your hand up, but there's two others who haven't spoken yet. If you don't mind, I'll leap over you and go to Jennifer and Marina. And then if we have time, I'll come back to you, Doug, if that's okay. Marina, I don't know which was first. Marina, please go.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for your presentation, Peter and Philip. In Mark Carney's new cabinet, I just noticed that the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Development, actually the department is no longer, doesn't have international development. It's just the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I'm just wondering how important international development will be in the new government. It's a comment or a thought, really. You don't have to answer, but it was a bit disappointing, having worked in international development, to see that it's off the map. And I'm just hoping that it won't be, that the whole situation will be on the radar in the new cabinet.
Frank, thank you for that comment. It's a valuable comment. I don't have an answer to that. It's too early.
No, I wasn't
Thank you for raising it. Yeah,
I wasn't.
Right. Okay. And Jennifer, Jennifer's off. Jennifer, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go for it.
I might be in the dark.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Me too.
Another thing that you may or may not be able to answer, Peter and Phil. I'm wondering about we hear that there's a big protests against Hamas in Gaza, and at first there was kind of a question: are they true? Is that just Israel, amplifying that message because that's of course, what they want? Or yeah, just sort of what was your, I don't know, as I say, I'm not sure if you were able to get that answer from your trip, but maybe just in general, what do you know about that in terms of the
I think I'm going to take a pass. I didn't. I have comments to make on that from talking to other people, Jennifer, but not from this trip. I didn't really have a sense of it, other than the one I just referenced. The person who said that he thought that if people had the opportunity to leave Gaza, given the future for their kids, they might do so. But I personally take with a great grain of salt the stuff about the amount of opposition to Hamas, but I don't know, and I can't go any farther than that. Doug, back to you.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep.
I just wanted to ask, there was some discussion about how Palestinians feel and how the average Israeli feels. And I was wondering if you visited your friend in Kufr Chasm, an Arab village in Israel with a Palestinian population, and how our friend that I got to visit with you talks about things and how he felt about things, or his family or his villagers.
Well, I mean, in general, yes, I did get to see him and spent some time with him. He is a reflection of those Palestinians that are very worried about the growing level of violence in Palestinian towns and about the race. For example, the town of Kufr Qasim or the town of al-Fahim doesn't get government subsidies, so it doesn't have a park. So they don't have a football field. You don't have a place where the kids can go. So they go to the nearest Arab town, as the nearest Jewish town, which is Afula. Afula has a nice park. The residents of Afula don't want Arabs there. They actually hired a security guard to keep Arabs out of the park. That went to court, and they had to take that down. But it is a reflection of the extent of hostility. So they are frustrated at the lack of services in Arab towns. They're frustrated at the rising crime rate, and they're frustrated in their workplace at the hostility they feel. So, as I say, those of them who have money and think they can would have a possibility to leave are thinking of leaving, but they're not very happy. Even ones with money. I talked to another friend who they could buy an apartment worth $2 million, but he had to go to half a dozen apartment buildings in Haifa before he could find one that would take Arabs. Arabs is a supposedly mixed city, but the racism is so intense that it's difficult for even a wealthy, well-educated Palestinian citizen of Israel to find an apartment that's suitable. I'm going to look down at chats if there are any questions. We did not meet anybody from the Canadian Embassy. We didn't see much evidence that the Israeli economy is suffering.
You got a new question, Peter, from a first timer.
Oh yeah, okay, a first timer, Judy McIntosh. Okay.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
I'm sure a lot of people saw the film that I saw, and I can't remember too much about it, but it was about some Israeli Americans, young people who went over to train in the IDF. They did their turn. Then they were doing all these military tactics. They were learning how to shoot. They were running around pretending villages and everything. But they were absolutely shocked to find out that they were learning to fight against Palestinians. There was no mention that the Palestinians even existed. I'm just making this comment because of the questions about denial. Right. And when they found out, they started a resistance movement, but it was just so shocking that they'd been there for months and no mention whatsoever that they were learning to fight against Palestinians.
Interesting. I didn't see that movie. Thank you for raising that, Judy.
I'll see if I can get the name of it and send it.
Okay, sure.
If I could just add, that movie is called Israelism.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And it is available actually free on the internet. I'm happy to put a note to Peter in the chat box if you would like to distribute.
What I can do is, thank you. That's Jess speaking there. I can
Yes.
put
Hi.
the link to Israelism in my follow-up email where I send out to all of you the video of this conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Independent Jewish Voices invited that speaker to Ottawa last year, and
Right.
they presented that film with the director, and it was very well attended.
Thank you. T. Jen. You go by T or Jen?
It's Tara. Hi, Peter. Hi. Thanks to you both for going on your trip. And it's nice to meet you, Philip. I've never met you before. And for putting all of this together, because I'm sure it took hours to prepare. I really appreciate this update on the situation over there. I'm going to ask something like a lot of people do, which is you might not have an answer, and it's sorry, but it's about Gaza. It's not even about the West Bank or Israel. And I see, and this is sort of open to anybody who wants to give me some feedback on this. I feel in terms of trying to help, yes, you could talk to MPs and so forth. But I see on social media sometimes people asking for money, that you send them money. And I just don't know what to do when I see these types of posts that come up. And I'm wondering if anybody knows of any legitimate people or organizations that still can offer support to Palestinians, and that these are people that I could, or organizations that I could send funds to so that they could turn around and help Gazans. So it was a little bit easier before the total blockade.
Right.
There was UN organizations, there was PCRF, I think the acronym, there's a bunch. But now that everything's shut down, and whatever food is left is probably astronomically expensive. And I would like to be able to help, but I don't want to be caught in scams. And so I'm just wondering if what anybody is doing now to help Gazans.
Right.
Is there a way?
David, do you want to speak to that? David Knoppert?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so there's a group called Connecting Gaza, one word, connectinggaza.org. So you have to go www.connectinggaza.org. That was started over a year ago by somebody who Peter knows, Rabbi David Mivisar out of Hamilton. And there are people from across Canada, the United States, and the UK. And they've made contact with families in Gaza. And every day we get stories back. There's a lady named Nicola in the UK who's sort of in the contact with them. So, and we just got videos today. Unbelievable how they're putting food together and they're contacting families. Also, they've started a pharmacy, believe it or not, in northern Gaza, and that pharmacist is supplying medicines free of charge to people. A lot of skin conditions, antibiotics. There was a lady who was pregnant. There was a diabetic who was able to get insulin. How he does this, I don't know. But it costs about...
I will include a link to it in the follow-up.
Yeah, so, okay. So anyway, sorry, I can go on and on, but that's the place I would highly recommend that, connectinggaza.org. Thanks, Peter.
Okay. And Barb Haddad, did you say you want to speak to that issue? I see you, Laurie, but I'm asking Barb. Barb, did you want to speak to this issue about offering funds? Barb, you're muted. Okay, I'll skip over Barb and go to Laurie. Laurie, you speak up.
Hi there. I heard a lot of criticism about the Netanyahu government. And was there a lot of any talk about how did their government allow October 7th to even happen? Like I heard that there was such a delay in them getting there, and then they were kind of crazy. They were killing their own people. And so is there a chance that this whole thing was part of a plan so that Israel can implement the greater Israel? Because we know Netanyahu went to United Nations and presented greater Israel.
Larry, do you mind if I interrupt you? I'm not going to deal with that issue tonight. This is not based on what we learned. I'm very happy to deal with it. I'm doing a presentation in Ottawa on Thursday night on Hamas, October 7th, and so on and so forth. If you're in Ottawa, you're most welcome to come. It's at the Quaker House. But that's not something that really comes out of the visit that Phil and I did. I have no value add based on a trip. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. It's a good issue for sure. Barb, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay, hey, just wanted to say hi, John, and really appreciate you having traveled there. I was pondering going and the fear of, my last name and about helping. So I went to a fundraiser in Perth the other day, and it's a very good organization. I'm trying to find them online, but I only can find them on Instagram. It's Piece by Piece, and they are helping displaced Gazans in Egypt. There are so many thousands that are living in extreme poverty. So that's an option. I can write it down. Peter, you can share it. It's that to me is one of my.
Sure. Give me the reference, Barb, and a line or two about what you know about it, and I can share that with people.
Yeah, and also the piece by piece individual who's running it can do presentations in Ottawa.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
I'll just say for myself,
Thank you.
I only give to actual people that I know. Otherwise, I stick to giving my money to organizations that I think are trying to build support in Canada. So there's two ways to approach it. One is the direct humanitarian aid, which is very necessary and important. And the other is we've got to develop pressure in Canada so that we're contributing more to stop the genocide. So that's important as well. We're getting near the end here. Barb, your hand is, lower your hand if it's okay. Is there anybody else who wants to make a last call? Phil, do you have some last remarks you want to make? No.
I don't think so.
Jen, I see Tara.
Yeah. Nablus. So I've been there, have a friend there, and it's my favorite city in the West Bank. I didn't hear you talk, maybe you did talk about Nablus, but I don't recall any specifics about Nablus. Was there anything that came to mind about when you were there?
I'll just say a couple of things about Nablus. Nablus is one that there are two or three major cities in the West Bank. Jenin is one, Nablus another, Ramallah and Hebron are probably the biggest, and Jericho are the biggest ones. Nablus is about 50 kilometers north of Ramallah. Last time I went there, I took a bus there. This time I was afraid to, so I went with a Palestinian man, drove me in his car. We went to Nablus, which is where the Balata refugee camp is, the largest refugee camp in the West Bank. Those people, most of them, come from the Jaffa area. They were expelled from Israel, what is now Israel, in 1947-48. What a lot of people in Canada don't realize, Jaffa is now a Israeli city, of course, but in the UN partition plan, Jaffa was to be part of the Arab state. But notwithstanding that, the Palestinians living in Jaffa were expelled, and many of them fled south to Gaza. A number of them went to the West Bank and are now in the Balata refugee camp, which is repeatedly attacked by the Israeli military. I was able to go there when I contacted my contact there at the Balata camp. The military was there, so I couldn't go. But the next day they weren't, and so I went the next day. And they told me a bit about the raid. They were going after some young man. It's a pattern. The Israelis sneak in under some ruse. In this case, it was the truck of rug salesmen. They have a white panel truck of people who look like they're selling rugs. And when they open the door, undercover soldiers jump out, and then the Israeli military comes in. And they were going after a young man who they went and arrested and beat him up and shot him. And then they beat him up and took him away. And and of course, all the young people in the camp throw stones at the Israeli soldiers when they come in, and that causes more people to get shot. When I was at the Balata camp, I bought about $100 worth of beautiful embroidered purses and satchels and so on, as much as I could carry. And I wished them good luck and left. Now, on the way out, they say it's only about 50 kilometers back to Jerusalem. But this is an example of what Philip was talking about, the blocked roads. We actually ran into 3 different roadblocks trying to get back to Jerusalem. And so a 50-kilometer trip, it actually ended up being more than 100 kilometers. It went down a road, all of a sudden we're stopped, get out of the car, find out what's going on. It stopped, come back, and my driver is talking on the phone, say, well, try this other one. We try the other one, we try the third one. And finally, it took us about 4 hours to get back. And it's all quite arbitrary. You don't know when that's going to happen or how long it's going to last. If you thought it was going to, if the barrier is going to be up in 10 minutes, you could wait, but you could be there all night watching Netflix movies, as Phil said. I'm going to take 3 more questions, and then we're going to wind up here. Anna Maria Layton.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter and Philip, for this presentation and the effort of educating us on the situation in Israel, Palestine. My question is about what could you sense about the reaction of people in Israel with respect to the protest, there has been big protests, especially in the global south, with countries like Chile cutting diplomatic relations, and so perhaps in the West the response has been most moderate because we're still friends of Israel and don't want to hurt. But in other places, the response has been more I don't know, direct. What's the feeling out there? Like, how are they seeing that? Do they really think that people in the global South are anti-Semites and they are all racist? What do they think? Are they afraid of that Israel might be isolating itself from the rest of the world? Like, what's the feeling out there? I'm curious.
Yeah, Anna Maria, those are all good points. I don't have any evidence. I have some feelings, but they're just feelings. I'm sorry, I can't really add to your stock of knowledge. Maybe Philip has something on that.
Well, the only thing I would say is that my sense is that most Israelis just look at America and they see Trump having given them a blank check to do whatever they want. And that's really all that matters, because America has the power. And at this point, very few other Western governments are going to stand up to Trump because they're dealing with him about tariffs and stuff like that. So really, it's all about American support. And yeah, I didn't sense it. I don't think anybody's too worried about what the global South is thinking. It's all about power, and that's the way that's the way they're wired. It's about power, and right now they have the unconditional support of the superpower.
David, you come back for your third kick at the can. It's going to be the last comment. So,
okay, Peter, thanks. Really quick, what did the parents have to say about their kids? The effect on mental aspects for the kids.
What do the parents, the people that we talk to, what do they say about their kids?
Yeah, are they worried about their future? I mean, the mental aspects, the mental anguish they're going through, is that a concern? I must be a concern. How was it? How were the kids?
I guess
you mean Palestinian kids or Israeli kids?
No, the Palestinian kids.
I think the answer is a bit different in Israel or in the West Bank. Maybe Philip, you want to make any comment about the West Bank? The threat in Israel is slightly different. But
I mean the West Bank.
Well, I mean it's difficult to say. It's all anecdotal, but I think for Palestinians, they have integrated the resistance to the occupation and everything is part of their lives, and they don't necessarily try and shield it from their kids. And I was in Nabi Saleh talking to some of the Tamimi family, and they take their kids to demonstrations because they can't. For one thing, you can't hide your kids from what's going on. And so they say, well, it's better to be proactive and have them out there rather than sitting in a house hiding and then Israelis shoot tear gas into it. So I think there's a certain amount of that, but I don't think anybody would wish what's going on in the West Bank on their kids, but it's for them, it's as somebody said, welcome, this is the life we live, this is our life. And it's difficult to get your head around, but it's the reality for them, and it has been for a long time.
I'm going to wind us up here. It's 8:55. I wanted to just quick comments. I would like to say, first of all, thank you for taking the time to attend. Most of the people who've commented tonight, I feel, are generally sympathetic to the Palestinian position. And sometimes I get criticized for talking to the choir. My response to that is that I see that our work as arming the choir. We're trying to give you more information, knowledge, insight, so that when you're sitting around at your dinner table or when you're talking to friends, you have some evidence, more evidence that you can use. The Canadian government position on this has been very weak, and it's partly due to the fact that the Canadian population doesn't really understand very well. And I think we all have a responsibility to raise this issue with our friends, and people are afraid to raise it because they don't feel they know enough. So I encourage you to raise it where you can. If you have questions, write me. I will follow up, send a copy of this video to you. I will also invite you to subscribe to my blog, my webinars. We also have Philip, who's done a lecture series. There's lots of information out there. But I want to thank Philip very much for agreeing to travel around with me. You're a very good travel companion. Thank you for all of you for attending tonight. I appreciate it.
Can I say two words?
Sure, go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I take away from all this is how complicit the Western governments are in what's going on, and that none of this would be happening if the West was not acquiescent to it at the very least. So I think it cannot be overstated the importance of political engagement. That's our job, is to raise awareness here and to put pressure however we can on our government. So I heartily endorse that. And I think also it's important to realize that we are at a turning point, in that the next 6 to 8 months, I was told more than once, that will be crucial in the long-term future of Palestine.
Well, and now there's 50 or 60,000 people killed. Will the West still be mute when 100,000 are killed, or 200? Yeah. We get to 500,000, we're starting to get into Holocaust territory. When will people start saying, well, no, governments say, yeah, you can't do this? It's on our watch. It's on all of us. It's on our responsibility. Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Grafton, in the background, for trying to keep control of things. And have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Phil.